Hey guys, what's up? Today's gonna be a little bit of a different video. Well, not too much different. Pretty much anything that's different would be me doing this outside, and I got a reason to. So this is gonna be one of the creepiest stories I've ever told. Like literally, I'm shaking. Somebody actually told me this. So basically, the story is I was at this place called Lad Lake. That's their photo up there. And this was a treatment center. If you guys don't know, I had anger problems as a kid, so I went there for a couple months during the COVID pandemic, and I met this guy named Jim. But everyone on other units called him Jimbo. Very nice guy. I actually, prior to this video, I tried to look at the site. I can't get into contact with him. I don't have his email, but I do know this guy, and this guy told me this story. And I'm doing it, and I'm covering his story today, and I will be showing you the documentary that he saw while years later. But I'll get into all that. But first things first. Sitting in my room one day, and Jim just came over just to check on all the kids and stuff. So I'm sitting in my room. He's like, "Hey, can I tell you a story?" And I'm like, "Sure, why not?" So here is his story. It is very haunting and chilling. So pretend I'm Jim. Okay, let's get into it. All right. When I used to live in California, I also mentored these kids. It was like a day program. And basically, I would mentor these kids, and I would take them to places like shopping, fun places and stuff. And usually this one place attracted the kids, and this was a park. Now, I do not know what park it is, but this was a park in California. But kids knew every time it started getting to 5 o'clock to like that 6 o'clock range, this park got really, really creepy. And it caught the kids off guard, and sometimes it wasn't even windy, and these swings would be moving. So we were there one day, and it was a beautiful day out. The sun was setting. It was around that time. So I get my kids, and I'm like, "Hey, all right, guys, let's go." We stayed a little bit longer than usual, so you know what happens. So we got to go back in the car. No problem. The kids get in the car. This is a van. There's two kids in the back, and there's one kid in the passenger. And I'm sitting down, and I'm about to pull out of the driveway, and the sun's setting, and it's getting dark, and I see this kid in a black hoodie, just looking down, face like this, and I hear a knock on my left window. I go to roll down my window, and I'm just looking at this kid, and another kid pops up, exactly same sweatshirt, hood down, and I'm confused. I don't know what's going on. So I ask, "Hey, do you need something?" Well, they have their hands in their pockets. They're looking down. They're just like, "Yeah, mister, can we get a ride home?" Uh, where are your parents? I replied. I would, but I don't know if I can. I mean, very creepy. I was very creeped out. But the kid, there's this one other kid that goes around, and he circles around to the passenger seat where that other kid is. And I'm weirded out, very weirded out. So I'm looking, and I just look up, and the kid looks up, and he has no eyes. It's pure black. So then I squint. I'm like looking at it, and he's looking back down. So I roll down up the window, and I turn to the passenger where my kid is, and the kid is just looking at this other person from that went around the car, and This kid just looking at him, just dead on, straight into his eyes. And the kid goes for the window and is about to roll this window. Now, this kid would listen to me no matter what. He had no issues with me. Every time this kid got told to do something, or, he's very good at following directions and very good at listening, had no problem with Jim. Jim says he has something, there's something caught off, catching me off guard. So I tell him, no, don't roll down that window. But he keeps doing it. Now I'm concerned because this kid listens to me all the time and he's not listening to me. So I give him a smack on the shoulder. Do not roll down that window. And he keeps pulling his window down. And finally, I'm shaking him. And the kid just kind of snaps out of a trance. And he's like, what? What's going on? So Jim was just shocked and he's creeped out. He's like, yeah, no, there's no way. He rolls down the window and he's just like, I'm sorry, I can't give you a ride. He rolls the window up. He pulls in reverse and he pulls back and he drives out of the park. And when the kids look back, there's nothing there. And Jim looks on the front mirror and he looks back and there's nothing there. And he and these kids were just creeped the hell out. And the creepiest thing about this story is fast forward a couple of years when Jim started working at Lad Lake. There was this, he was used to work at a unit with this guy. I don't remember his name, but he cooked food and really good food too. They would call him Santa Claus because he had a Santa Claus beard and that he literally looked like Santa, just in Hawaiian shirts and cool ass clothes and stuff, but they call him Santa. So Santa was cooking food for the unit that day, and Jim's just kind of sitting there on the couch, just observing the kids, and one of the kids is watching this show, and he starts to hear something very familiar on the TV. So now he's watching it, and he's really into it, and he's looking at it, and there are these stories about these kids with black hoods, with black eyes. And he's thinking to himself, that sounds so oh my God. It clicks in his mind. Years ago, he was one of those people. So he's all into it now. He's into the show, and there's more stories I could cover. There was this one woman who was pushing her cart out of a shopping. This is what Jim was telling me on that. She pushed her cart up, and these kids with black hoodies, with black eyes, came up to her saying, hey, can we borrow your credit card? So, and same thing would happen. They'd get weirded out and eventually just drove off. There was another person where he went to go check his mail. Another person said, oh, well, can I come in your house and get a bite to eat? And I don't know, a bunch of stories. And Jim was one of those people. So he was very creeped out by this, and he's telling the whole unit it, and he eventually told me. So I was pretty damn creeped out by this story, and I did a little bit of research, and I didn't really know what to look up. Now, I don't think this is the documentary that he was watching specifically. I do not know for sure. But the description, and when I watch this video, the description is perfect and it matches what I'm trying to explain to you guys, and it's the closest I could find. If you guys in the comments could find what story this is, or what documentary this is, or a video, or I don't know, anything, that would be awesome, because honestly, I'm hooked into this too. I kind of want to figure out what actually happened that night. But here's the closest thing that I found to the documentary.
You're relaxing at home when there's a knock on the door. You peer through the peephole and see a small child with their hoodie obscuring their face. You open your door and ask if they need help, but when they look up, you are staring into black, lifeless eyes. It's not hard to figure out why these creatures horrify us so much. It's in their name. Black-eyed children, or black-eyed kids, also known as BEK, are modern monsters whose eerie and unnatural appearance and behavior inspire fear. The unusual eyes are unnerving, but it's the age of these monsters that really amps up the terror. What is it about evil children that freaks us out so much? I'm Dr. Emily Zarka, and this is Monstrum. The first report of a black-eyed kid appeared in 1998. Texan reporter Brian Bethel wrote of an experience he had 2 years prior while he was sitting in his car near a movie theater. Bethel claimed that his car was approached by two boys around the ages of 9 and 12 wearing hooded sweatshirts. One appeared as an olive-skinned, curly-headed young man, and the other a red-headed, pale-skinned, freckled young man. Bethel opened the window a crack, and the two boys asked for a ride to their mother's house to pick up some money so they could see the Mortal Kombat movie. To this day, Bethel recalls that when the second one of the boys spoke, he felt an unnatural sense of dread. He pointed out the movie had already started and they wouldn't make it back in time, but the boys began to push harder, saying things like they were just two kids and that they didn't have a gun or anything. Bethel describes their voices as mechanical and rehearsed. The strange experience culminated in terror when he realized each boy had black eyes, soulless orbs, with no white showing at all. Understandably unnerved, he began to drive away, but one of the boys banged on his window and angrily cried, "We can't come in unless you tell us it's okay. Let us in." Bethel sped off, and upon checking his rearview mirror, he noted that the strange black-eyed children had completely vanished. In 2013, Bethel wrote that his strange experience with these children was originally shared in a private communication with a small group of friends on an email list that then was leaked onto the internet. I couldn't find any evidence of this original document, but Bethel's story is undoubtedly the foundation of all BEK lore, and that's how an urban legend is born. In eyewitness accounts and other stories, the childlike creatures are frequently wearing hooded clothing, although some versions claim they are dressed in antiquated outfits. They have odd speech patterns, black eyes, and perhaps most importantly, they just don't act in a way we think children should. Similar to some vampire legends, it appears that they must be invited into a private space, and to me, this creepiness evokes fairy, demon, and changeling vibes. Though encounters tend to end without lasting effects, some people who've had run-ins with these creatures report nightmares and agoraphobia. Through the numerous interviews Bethel conducted as his story circulated online, others across the world began to speak up about their own supposed experiences with other black-eyed children. England in particular seems plagued by black-eyed children, and they often serve as fodder for tabloid magazines and newspapers. Like in 2014, when songwriter and paranormal investigator Lee Brickley was interviewed by the Birmingham Mail about the sighting in Cannock Chase, England. The sensational story was quickly picked up by the British and international press. Brickley had been investigating rumored sightings of a black-eyed ghost in Cannock Chase, including one where a woman and her daughter were out for a walk when they heard screams and spotted a child wandering alone. The mother ran to catch up but could not find the child. When she turned back around, a girl appearing to be 10 years old stood there with her hands over her eyes. She asked, "Are you okay? Were you screaming?" The girl just dropped her hands and revealed eyes the woman said were completely black, no iris, no white. Startled, the woman grabbed her daughter and jumped back. When she looked up, expecting to see the child, she'd vanished. Interestingly, Brickley also claims that the same girl, whom he calls a ghost, had been seen 30 years earlier in 1982 in that same area by his own aunt, something he wrote about in his 2013 book, UFOs, Werewolves, and the Pigman. Brickley claims that his aunt heard a child crying at night, and following the sobs, she came upon a girl about 6 years old who looked up at her with completely black eyes before racing off into the woods. Even a police search for the child turned up nothing. The sightings of the singular female BEK in Cannock Chase may be connected to a real-life tragedy that influenced Brickley's identification of the creature as a ghost. Cannock Chase made headlines in the 1960s as the site of one of the largest police investigations in British history, the search for the murderer of 3 local schoolgirls. Some say the black-eyed child of that area is the ghost of one of the girls, and it would make sense that a young female resident who grew up with those stories would believe that she had seen something even if it wasn't there. As the urban legend of the Black-Eyed Children evolved out of references to eyewitness accounts of the monsters in the British and American press, their presence across media of all kinds exploded. Numerous YouTube videos claim to show evidence that such creatures exist. The BEK also gained notoriety and lore expansion through crowd-funded fan fiction texts and productions like Sunshine Girl and The Hunt for Black-Eyed Kids, The Black-Eyed Children, and Black-Eyed Children Let Me In. The comic series BEK expands the monster's threat with the invention of a violent origin story, where regular children turn into black-eyed kids if they murder their family. BEK are such great modern folklore because they defy romanticized notions of childhood and the inherent goodness of children, ideas that have evolved over time. The perception of children as innocent and weak, requiring constant adult instruction both morally and physically, is a relatively modern invention. Prior to the Romantic period, children were largely socially insignificant. They were background characters, relegated to chores, familial duties, and little else. But with the progression of the Industrial Age in the late 18th century, as infant mortality declined and literature and philosophy regarding child education grew, alongside increased scrutiny around child labor, the cultural concept of the child changed. Childhood became a sacred cultural symbol, a time of perceived innocence and happiness when children were not valued for their usefulness or economic viability, but rather for their hopeful possibility and vulnerability. This view of childhood continued to progress and evolve well into the 20th century, when the seismic social shifts following World War II changed everything. Suddenly, youth culture and scrutiny of popular media's influence on children became hot topics, and 1950s pop culture was flooded with movies and literature showing bad kids and juvenile delinquents. Around this time, the theme of children being born evil became a prevalent one, as we were introduced to ever younger characters with genetically inherited threatening characteristics, like a desire to kill and mind control. Then through the 1970s and all the way into the 90s, we see a spike in horror texts with children possessed by demons or some other kind of evil entity. They're even portrayed as the literal offspring of Satan or the devil himself.
Yes, very creepy. But it matches everything. Its description, black hood, black eyes, children, going to people's cars and stuff. And yeah, pretty damn creepy. But anyway, guys, that is today's video. Thank you guys for the goosebumps and the creepiness. Subscribe. I hope I see you in the next video. Take care.